Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Hill. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and welcome to Litera TV, where I'm grateful to Anjali Kashyap for joining me. Hi Anjali.
Hi Caroline.
Anjali she's lead legal operations and outside counsel management EMEA at Facebook, which is one of the core members of Clock, as you know, as well as just being one of the big tech giants that I don't think Facebook needs any introduction. Anjali's been in her role at Facebook for just under 2 years. And before that at Facebook was compliance, regulatory and law enforcement legal project manager. And I'm right in saying, so your entry into law was IT trainer at Slaughter and May, is that right?
It was, yes, many years ago now. But yeah, that was my many years ago.
Many years. And after that, you became project manager at Withers. You worked at a number of other firms before moving into legal project management at Herbert Smith Freehills, and then Latin Masons, which was your last role before Facebook.
That's right. Yes, indeed.
So tell us that there's so much focus now on the legal role. And so tell us about your role. What does your role involve now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question, because the spectrum is so broad for legal operations, and it really depends from firm to firm about how it is interpreted. So my role is very much, I would say, externally facing. It revolves very much around outside counsel management, the management of spend as well, obviously. And internally, I would say that it focuses very much on making sure that our in-house lawyers have everything that they possibly need to function well, and that they know all the processes, that they know how to onboard suppliers and so forth. So it's really dual faceted.
Okay. And tell us, so in my work, so in tech, there's obviously a huge focus on legal operations. And I think people have been quite, within the tech world, grateful to have the rise of legal operations, people who can speak the language, who can actually really start to deliver. But how much is your role about tech, and how much is it, say, for example, project management? You've obviously just talked about outside counsel, but how much is, how does it sort of break down in terms of your sort of remit and priorities?
Yeah, so I would say that there is a lot of project management skill that's needed in my role to run a lot of the legal operations initiatives that we've got in motion at the moment. So definitely there is a strong project management angle, but I would say that my technology background has also been super helpful in this role. And I'm sure we'll move on to talk about that in more detail. But it's obviously really useful when developing solutions with clients, understanding about how technology can really help lawyers do their job better.
Yeah, okay. So just before we definitely do a dive into that. Tell us, just to give people a bit of background to the team. How big is the team you work for? So the legal team you work for?
Yeah, so the legal team that our legal operations team service, the latest figures were about 1,700, and we've experienced this massive growth. So we're almost the size of, a medium-sized law firm now as an in-house team. And it's also really interesting that 800 of those people were onboarded remotely during the pandemic. So, it's been a massive time of growth for us. And that does comprise both permanent people and also contingent workers or contract workers.
Okay, so that's let's say that again. So that's 1,700 lawyers.
1,700 people in the legal team. So that's lawyers.
Wow, that's huge, isn't it? I mean,
yes, massive numbers.
And that is, just to be clear, so that's global. That's globally.
That is globally. That's right. Yes.
Okay, that's really interesting. Because I was going to ask you. So because the team is headed by Director of Legal Operations Akshay Verma, who used to be Axiom.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you if it's growing, and that's a very clear answer. That's grown enormously. It's really interesting that so many people came on during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, with the growth in the legal team, obviously comes a bit of growth for legal operations as well. Yeah. And we've grown. We're about 20 people at the moment, but that also includes our operational hub that we have based in the States as well.
Okay.
So our team has also grown in line with that lawyer growth. And yeah, as I say, we sit at about 20. We're 2 people in EMEA though, so we are hoping to grow out a more distributed model as as time goes on, with the potential recruit in APAC as well.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's heavily, but I suppose it makes sense that it'd be heavily based in the US. But
yes, exactly. Yeah, definitely the centre of gravity. And it's where this function began for Facebook. So there's a strong US flavour throughout. Yeah. But obviously, as we get more regions on board and more attention to local requirements, that flavour will obviously change a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going on to talk about a bit more into the tech. So what would you say is your core tech stack?
Yeah, I mean, we use a lot of Google Suite at Facebook. Obviously, being a tech company, we also home grow a lot of solutions as well. So, that's definitely in motion and will continue, I expect. But what might also continue is that we're slowly also procuring external software as well, especially market-leading legal software. So that might happen as well. But in addition, and as I just mentioned, we do also buy technology from OC as well, whether that's instances of sharing software or whether it's development of an end-to-end solution. And I've very recently been involved in a project that has been developing an end-to-end solution with OC.
Interesting. And I suppose maybe, can we talk about that or not? Not today. Not today. Maybe we come back to that. Yeah. But so that's interesting. So you develop a lot of your own in terms of the core stuff. So it's a lot. I'm interested in about the point that a lot of it is homegrown.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we always attempt that, and it's often a first stop for us to see whether we can develop something in-house. And part of that sometimes is about confidentiality as well, and the way that our data is moving around. It's obviously better if it's all kept in-house as far as possible. But sometimes, it is better to procure solutions, and so that also happens.
Yeah, it's interesting you do that through your outside counsel firm. So you prefer to do that rather than kind of going to market, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, that might change in time, but often this is done on a matter by matter or an RFP by RFP basis. Yeah. So, along with the legal expertise that's often being offered to us, sometimes that will come with something like a sharing portal, which is obviously great and benefits the lawyers massively. So we'll just buy an instance of that for example, large litigation cases.
Okay, that's interesting. And yeah, that's interesting. So in terms of your strategic, what would you say, I suppose this is a very vague question really, but given what you said in terms of, the way that you procure technology and the way that you're working, what would you say are your strategic priorities at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I would say as a global team, there's definitely a lot of emphasis on spend at the moment, and OC spend, moving away from the billable hour without shadow of a doubt. And also just bringing in more alternative fee arrangements to give us better predictability on our spend. So I would say that's definitely one element of our strategic priorities. For the region, there is obviously all of those strategic priorities that are cascaded into EMEA. But in addition, I would particularly like to focus on making sure that our lawyers are fully skilled up on a lot of our internal processes that are really subject to a lot of change. But we need to somehow make sure that those lawyers are completely up to date with those processes so that they can work smoothly through their matter opening, etc.
So is that a kind of training piece then? Is that a sort of trying to automate things a bit more, sort of in terms of looking at workflow and that sort of thing? Is that
I think there's definitely a training element to this. There's definitely a distillation, if you like, of information that comes across from the US. And there's definitely an element of tailoring for the EMEA audience that we really need to put into place to make sure that they are fully comfortable with the processes and that they can, this doesn't become a huge part of their day job, essentially.
time
that they can, so they can focus on that strategic lawyering that they're so magnificent at. So yeah,
it makes so much sense. I've seen so much in terms of, you know, a lot of the no code automation and all of this kind of stuff. Just lawyers, because a lot of, and for the legal teams as well, it means that, you know, so much time is spent on processes that are not efficient, aren't they? You know, and
that's right.
Legal operations really to be where some of the real value lies in sort of really unpicking the process and actually doing so really working out how you do what you do and how you need to cut the time out where it isn't required.
Yes, exactly. You know, and we're using technology like workflow technology to streamline those processes so that they're not quite so labour intensive. However, it's really important to us as an organisation that we remain compliant with some of the regulatory bodies that have stipulated that we act in a certain way. It's obviously key that we're compliant with all of those. So there's always this lovely tension behind giving the lawyers what they need to make things as efficient as possible versus making sure that we're fully compliant where we need to be.
That's really interesting. So, and then you've obviously got one of the more mature legal ops teams and one of the biggest legal teams. What do you think is the learning in terms of, I mean, costs, as you said, is always a priority. I've never seen one in-house person who hasn't said cost is under continual pressure. What's your learning in terms of meeting the continual demand to drive down costs of the legal department, and how critical is your role in that?
It's a great question. And I'd say that, you know, as you say, cost is front and centre for a lot of people at the moment. And, you know, it is also true for us as well, given, you know, the economic environment that we find ourselves in. What we're really looking for is, I think, you know, the use of more alternative fee arrangements by law firms, and then also proactively suggesting those as well, you know, and creatively thinking with us to come up with those solutions that give us that predictability and enable us to share the risk more effectively behind some of the matters that we're working on with them. So that's definitely, you know, part of our learning to date, is that, you know, we all need to get better at that in a way.
Okay. So I've seen. It's interesting. It's such an interesting time, isn't it? You know, law firms do seem to me to be becoming more aware, and also there's a wider move to enterprise technology, such as. It seems to me that whatever it is, that better collaboration can be the source also of driving down costs, because you remove that delay, you remove that middle. You know, if you can just have a platform where you can all operate, and it just take. What do you make of the shift to Microsoft Teams? I don't know that this really affects you, actually. I know roughly what your answer is going to be, but there's a wider shift among law firms to Teams. There's a big focus on it. But even if we take out the word Teams, like collaboration, enterprise tech, that is a good thing. And what's your sort of version of it? Because I know you're not necessarily looking at Teams.
No, we don't. But I think the general level of collaboration that we see from our OC is absolutely fantastic. You know, the way that they collaborate with themselves as a team as well, the way that they collaborate with us is absolutely brilliant and very, very smooth. You know, we often find our OC are very welcome to jumping on our technology and using our technology to communicate with us, whether that be G Suite or whether that be Facebook Rooms or our VC software Blue Jeans. You know, our OC are really welcoming to, you know, to using those technologies, which is great. Overarchingly, I think it's just been amazing as well, the way that legal has evolved during these really difficult times to use those technologies. And so that's been really impressive. And I can honestly say, I don't think I've heard of any of our lawyers or had any firsthand experience of, you know, people working in disparate environments affecting the service that we're receiving. So, yeah, overall, it's been great.
That's really good to hear. I've been so impressed. I've been, you know, I think everyone surprised themselves actually over the past year with how seamless it was. And actually, I see within law firms has become elevated, or it certainly was during the start of the pandemic. But so that, and those are the platforms that you use primarily, the ones that, in terms of collaboration, the ones that you've just mentioned.
Yeah, so we use G Suite, we use Blue Jeans for our VC, but we also we do have corporate Zoom as well. So we do use that. And also Facebook Rooms is our newest piece of technology. So yeah, we've got a real menu of collaborative technology that we can use with our OC, and also internally to Facebook, we use things like Workplace. So Workplace chat is now really critical to the way that I work. And I am surprised, coming in from law firms, just how, used I've got to working on that and pinging people to get very quick responses. So yeah, it's great the way that collaborative technology has really blossomed during these times. Yeah,
amazing. So, and then when it comes to your OC, your outside counsel management role, tell us a bit more about that in terms of how you manage that sort of slightly separate side, but obviously equally critical.
Yeah, absolutely. So OC management is a massive part of my role. And again, it really depends on, it's everything. It's such a broad spectrum of work, from helping our OC get paid, for example, or at least referring them to the right person to get help, right through to, more high impact pieces like bringing in master retention agreements across some of our key OC. So it really is a broad spectrum. But ultimately, I think for me, it really boils down to building those respectful partnering relationships with OC, both building and maintaining them, and that's really key. And I think that's what leads to the great service that we get from OC. And obviously that needs to continue for us. So yeah, I would say that's a really key part of my role, and one that I really enjoy, actually. So yeah.
I guess, I mean, that's interesting you say respectful. I think some of the interesting developments that I've seen where people have gone perhaps for a retainer type role or whatever, I guess the more you get to know one another, and the more you get to, like these, sometimes I know people are moving away from these giant panels, although the banks, but where a tiny bit of work, because actually I think you have to really they have to understand more about what the client wants, don't they? And actually there's a reward in it to sort of start making real progress.
Yeah, that's right. And especially for us, because, we are often working, at the very frontiers, I suppose, of a lot of these new laws that are coming in. There is a lot of novel legal challenge being thrown at us as an organisation. So we need the best OC on board, and we're demanding, but because of those reasons, and so, we really need OC to be playing their role. And to do that, we need really good relationships with them.
Yeah. How do you, because obviously, so relationship is one thing, but then I guess you have to, how do you monitor performance? Tell me a bit about I know you've got, is it new, or you've got a newish outside counsel program?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in line with what I just said, I suppose, about, keeping those respectful relationships and enhancing them, we've got an OC management program that my colleague in the US is currently running, and it is fairly new. So it's our top 20 OC. And the objectives of that program are really to deepen and enhance the relationships that we have with those 20 OC. And that will involve things like training, training them better on our processes. For example, looking at their diversity and encouraging their diversity. So there'll be a whole range of initiatives around underpinning those really precious relationships that we have and want to maintain and grow further.
That's interesting. So, is it quite different? Are there any big differences in terms of how you're managing them, or the expectations as part of the OC program, or does it just kind of codify everything that's gone before?
Yeah, I think they will get more. I mean, this is, definitely a work in progress as well, but they will be offered more contact time with Facebook. I think that's probably the best way of, putting it. Okay. They will be offered, as I say, more training and just more contact time with us as a part of being, part of our top set of OC, if you like.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And then and in terms of the key challenges, so obviously firms do fall short, and obviously it sounds like firms have really stepped up, but on a general basis, no firms. What do you think are the key challenges? Where do firms fall short typically, and what more should they be doing perhaps?
Great question. So I think in terms of falling short, I think, as I've mentioned, is, sometimes I'm slightly surprised by, that there isn't more creativity and, quite frankly, more knowledge when it comes to pricing arrangements and pricing structures. So just, on that, in the US now, the vast majority of our litigation is done on a fixed fee basis, but we haven't really quite got that far in the UK and across EMEA. And it would be lovely to start moving in that direction now. Yeah. And sometimes, we don't manage to really get that from our OC, in terms of that proactive help in how we can, as I've said, balance that risk between us, and also get a more predictable pricing structure. So I would say that is one area where I'd say they potentially fall short. I have, being completely honest. And, to your other point about where they surpass, I think the service levels we're offered are, absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And, as I mentioned, we are a demanding client. It goes without saying, we have very short notice pieces of work that need to be dealt with. And oftentimes we find that our OC do step up to that. Yes. So long may that continue.
That's good to hear. And with the pricing, it's interesting. I think that I've seen a lot of progress recently with them. Yeah. Obviously, one of the things they really struggle with is even understanding, to be honest with you. Yeah. Lack of understanding. I think there's better technology now on the market that they can use, and there's perhaps I hesitate to say they're driving towards standardization, but there seems to be more understanding that they really need to get to grips with pricing. So it seems like something that they've really struggled with. But I think that client pressure is also helping, right? To say, well, actually, it's no longer good enough to tell us that you don't understand, or you can't, or you just do this when it comes to
that's it. And, having worked in law firms before, I know that they've got massive data sets that they can use, and, they can, I'm sure, provide us with more predictable pricing based on the vast experience and, the vast amount of data that they have to analyse.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's one thing that we're sort of following very closely. So I was going to ask you how COVID has impacted law firm performance. I think obviously they've risen to the challenge. Is there anything that has happened over the past year that's perhaps been a surprise, or other than the fact that they've just stepped up, or how just more generally has COVID impacted law firm performance, would you say?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I don't think that we've noticed any real shortcomings in light of the pandemic conditions that have been provided to us over the last year. So, I'm really impressed at that. I think the one thing I would say around that is I really hope that legal continues to allow this flexibility with their talent pool. It's such a demanding profession. And I think to give them that trust and give them that flexibility and that work-life balance is going to be massively powerful for retention of staff, and particularly to the diversity point. It could really enable and balance the field out a little bit, which would be amazing.
Agree. It's been so, and I hope that too. There's a lot of surveys at the moment, and firms, I do fear that firms will start saying, everyone has to go back to the office, and just, being very blunt tooled about it. But hopefully, let's talk about diversity. So how do you, so obviously D&I, some of the big tech giants have been extremely, at the forefront of driving diversity. But so how do you try to ensure diversity and inclusion with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's a really fantastic question. And, when I was at law firms and D&I was almost in its infancy, I always thought that change would only really come with client pressure. Yeah. And so now I find myself in a really interesting position where, I'm in client shoes and we can actually try to move the dial on what our law firms are doing. So, to your question on how we try and encourage this, I think in RFP processes, we really try and make sure that, we stress the importance of diversity to us. So diversity and inclusion is tremendously important to us internally as Facebook, but also, we expect that of our OC as well. And whilst we don't have stipulated percentages that they might have in the US, we're still really driving for it here. And so it would be great to see some of those statistics improved. I think law firms have predominantly focused on gender diversity in the last, good sort of 5 years upward. But I think we now need to sort of really shift and really look at, underrepresented groups. Race and ethnicity is super important. And I have to be honest that some of the statistics that I see coming through as part of RFPs are really disappointing when we look at the number of or the diversity of partnership, for example. It's really sobering and almost saddening to see. So I'm really hoping that might change through not just Facebook, but all of their clients putting pressure to try to reframe that theme within legal firms.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on. I think it's depressing. It goes as far as to say it's depressing.
Yeah.
There were a lot of surveys. It obviously came to light during the Black Lives Matter of surveys done by some of the mainstream legal magazines, which were just depressing, when they looked at diversity stats and in terms of race, it was just awful. And I do think so. I do feel like, as you say, clients are in a position to drive this forward. I spoke to one client who said during the RFP process, you would get she actually didn't give somebody the work because they put forward a woman to do the pitch, but then when it came to signing, they sent a man, and she. And I know that because it was the woman who'd done the work the whole way through. I mean, there probably other reasons for it, but I guess clients really, I think, are in a position. Do you think clients should be doing more, just as a general, not just Facebook? And you've already. Do you think clients should be doing much more to drive diversity?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we all need to be pulling together in some way to really create that change within our OC. And I think there are groups who are focusing on doing that or slowly starting to focus on doing that. So I'm really hoping that we'll start to see some positive change. But, I don't think it's all gloomy. And I know that a lot of law firms are trying really hard and they are proactively reaching into clients like us to say, hey, we've got this initiative, would you partner with us, whether that's around social mobility, whether that's regular sessions, about certain themes. So I think there is a lot of effort here, but we need to absolutely make sure that it is not performative and that it is really moving the dial in the right direction and bringing long-term change.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think we'll leave it on that note. And it's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks, Anjali. Thanks for sharing with us, and hopefully catch up again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.